West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So a lot to get to with our team. National politics team leader for Bloomberg, Mario Parker, with us at the table, along with political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Patricia Murphy, former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Jeremy Saland, and CNN contributor and former Georgia State Senator who also testified, we should note, in this probe for the grand jury, Jen Jordan. Great to have everyone. Appreciate you being here, Jen. Let's just sort of full circle for you. You were a state lawmaker in the room when people like Rudy Giuliani came down and perpetuated lies and falsehoods about what happened in Georgia. Then you're testified before the grand jury, and now you see Trump arrested, booked, mugshot. Surreal?
Well, it feels a lot better.
Too real?
Well, it feels a lot better on this end than it did in the beginning. I mean, the surreal part was when they actually came down to Georgia and presented basically a false narrative. And so now, you know, it feels like for 2 years, there's been kind of this national gaslighting that what you saw wasn't real. You know, I didn't say that. But the video doesn't lie. And we all know what we saw and what we heard. And I was just glad that the grand jury agreed, you know, that there were laws broken. And now he's actually going to be held accountable. And no matter what happens with respect to a jury trial, at the end of the day, he's been indicted. That is a huge thing. It is such a big deal for the prosecutor to have even brought this case, and took an immense amount of courage. So it is very real, and it's something that we need to keep watching. But yesterday was a really historic day, and not in a good way, right?
Yeah. We should note there's a presumption of innocence for any defendant
Absolutely.
Before they go through a jury trial of their peers.
And Mario, this morning there will be news anchors around the world reading over that mugshot in a myriad of languages, reading that inmate number. And the president's campaign, they're exploiting it, they're selling it, they are making some money off of it because he will need it. Put the photograph into context for us.
Yeah, well, they're going to try to wring as much juice out of this as they possibly can and signal, at least to their supporters, that he's fighting for you, that this is a political, there's a double standard here. This is election interference. He needs your help. He needs you to galvanize and get behind him as well. So again, the campaign is taking lemons, trying to make lemonade out of this, this is the hand that they've been dealt. So they're trying to use it for whatever they can to just try to capitalize off of it. And so far, it's been working if you look at the polls at least.
Georgia, I think our colleague Stephen Collinson, as he always does, frames this so well. Let me read people part of his column this morning. For a man who built his legend through paparazzi snaps in New York gossip columns and who prizes Time magazine bearing his face, the Georgia mugshot, for all its indignity, represents yet another new frontier of notoriety. But for a nation still entangled in recriminations and fury whipped up by Trump, the photograph, which flashed immediately around the world, represents a special kind of tragedy. quite a juxtaposition of then and now.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's just another piece of this story that I think many of us never expected to see. It just feels so surreal, having covered the Trump campaigns in 2015, his early support, how much his crowds just adored him. But then watching the complete chaos that followed here in Georgia in 2020 because of the actions of Donald Trump and the Trump campaign, seeing this mugshot feels like another chapter in a book that just will not end. This campaign has not ended here in Georgia for the last 3 years. Obviously, we see it's going to continue. But in terms of how iconic that photo is, we now have his supporters in Georgia photoshopping themselves into mugshots, Fulton County mugshots, putting those on Twitter and calling them MAGA mugshots and saying now it's on. So he has galvanized his supporters even further. That's going to be a huge problem if he makes it to a general campaign. But so far right now, his base is sticking with him more than they ever have.
We can put one of those up. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she tweeted out a photoshopped mugshot with the hashtag MAGA mugshot. Jeremy, you've been shaking your head as that was described. What are you thinking?
It's deplorable. It's a mockery of justice. It shows the insanity, or for lack of a better term, of people who are so lost in their obsession with Donald Trump and this theory that the election was stolen. And I saying pathetic is not strong enough. It's just really sad. He, as you pointed out, Poppy, he's innocent until proven guilty. That's not the issue here. But to stand behind in such a way, to make excuses in such a way blindly, that's not what this is about. Hold the prosecution to their burden, but don't just jump on this bandwagon for a political, future or gain.
All of the focus, understandably, is on Trump, right? And the mugshot, et cetera. Mark Meadows to an extent after that. But let's not forget that Jeffrey Clark surrendered overnight, too. And he was working at the Department of Justice and within government, the Department of Justice, and yet is accused of working to perpetuate these lies and undo what the voters had done.
That is treason
That is not what he's charged with.
No, that's not. I'm talking from just a general thought process here. Yes, again, everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But now that he's at that point where he has to face these charges, he's trying for removal as well to get this to federal court. And as we discussed earlier, yes, he was a federal officer at the time that he's alleged to have committed these acts. But the next question is what he did, was that in furtherance of his role in the Department of Justice? And the argument is that it was not. Therefore, it stays with the state and it can be prosecuted, in this case, for a larger RICO crime.
So we heard from, and Control Room, let me know if we have the sound of the former president describing his terrible experience ready. And Jen, I'll bring that to you. I want you to listen to what the former president said about while he was there at Rice Street, and then we'll talk about contrasting that with the experience of some of the people he targeted over these last several years. Let's play it.
Terrible experience. I came in, I was treated very nicely, but it is what it is. I took a mugshot, which I never heard the words mugshot. Didn't teach me that at the Wharton School of Finance. And I have to go through a process. It's election interference.
He was in and out in 20 minutes. But if you contrast that with some of the people he focused on, the individuals, Ruby Freeman, Shay Moss, over the last several years, who said that they could not go to grocery stores. They were afraid to go out. People came to their homes. What do you hear there in the president's description of his experience?
I just don't think he gets it. And I think, when we see the Marjorie Taylor Greene MAGA mugshot, there seems to be a real disconnect from reality. Look, Rice Street is a jail that is awful.
No question.
People are dying there because the conditions are so absolutely deplorable. So the fact that he basically got this great treatment, he comes in 20 minutes, in and out, right? Done and done. And somehow that was awful and bad, when the reality is people that get booked every day there and that have their mugshots taken and that actually have to be in jail there, this is very, very serious. And so, for all of these people doing these MAGA mugshots, for whatever reason they're doing it, they just have no understand what this really stands for. I mean, this is not good, right? He is in significant legal trouble. And so whether he thinks this is more of a political thing that he needs to massage or not, as a lawyer, he needs to stand down and really focus on his defense, because he is facing serious allegations that could end him up with serious time in prison. And that mugshot's not going to really mean anything at the end of the day if he's locked up.
I just ask, because you know Georgia so well, if Trump is convicted on these charges in state court, if it doesn't get removed to federal, would he go to that jail first?
Yeah.
That one that
yes.
he was in last night.
He would be held there until they send him to whatever prison he is then assigned to. If he got jail time.
It is Friday, the 25th of August of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is the door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yeah, put that in your hopper. Okay, we touch all bases here, I gotta tell you. Every talisman that can be touched, we do. That's why. I don't know what the completion of that sentence is, but it is just why. All right. Still need another cup of coffee. And we have a pretty big cup of coffee when we get one. Just letting you know. That's how we do ceramics around here. None of this measly 6'3", 215 diminutive types. Can you believe that guy? 215. My God. I mean, when they said he was 238, I've been doing this, since we first heard he supposedly weighed 238 at 6'3". First of all, he's not 6'3". You put him up against people who are considerably shorter than 6'3", like, around 6'1", like little guys like me. And he looks around that height. I'm just saying. But regardless, this 238 that we heard, I think even it was Ronnie Jackson, who tried to pass that off. Or it could have been the crazy-eyed one who died not terribly long ago. I think, it was his personal doctor from New York before Ronnie Jackson. I don't know, he looked like he was a manufacturer and pusher of LSD. Is he the reason we have strychnine and LSD? Donald Trump's doctor? I was wondering about that. Anyway, the 238 poundage that the guy had, no one believed that. You'd put a picture of Andrew Luck, who was, the going thing at the time. It was before he suddenly quit. Why did he do that? Well, we know why. He was smart. But nonetheless, when Andrew Luck was just getting out of Stanford and going to the pros, there's a picture of him in the locker room with his shirt off. 6'3", 238. Guy's cut. I know he's a kid. And muscle mass weighs more than fat. But anyway, in other words, you got to have a lot of pounds on to look fat, huh? Is that what that means? Anyway, there's no way. And now they're putting up side-by-side things of people who weigh 215, 6'3", 215. Even Rex Chapman did a picture of him, except I thought he was taller than 6'3", because he's listed as 6'4" in his, but that was during his playing days, and we all shrink, So maybe I'm not 6'1" anymore. Nah, I'm still around 6'1" because I was tall. I was up about 6 3/4 of an inch. I had to put the 3/4 in. Yeah. Just so everybody would know I'm not just a merely 6'1". I'm 6'1 3/4. Yeah. Anyway, they have to know, and when I say they, it's with a capital T, they have to know your actual height and weight, truly. Because if something untoward were to happen to you and they had to do emergency treatment and get an anesthesiologist out there and put the gas mask on you, if you've lied about your height and weight, you might end up dead. Because that is how they determine the concentration of whatever knockout drug they're giving you. If you've lied, you might be getting too much. Or you might be getting too little and you'll wake up on the operating table with your gut flailed open. No one likes to see that. No one. Especially when you're on your back and you're seeing it done to you. Should we go into that so early in the morning? It's not early in the morning everywhere in the world. Okay. So you had the debate. You had then Donnie Trump. And this is the other thing. What is with that entourage that he got from the airport to the jail, then back to the airport? How many motorcycle cops does Atlanta have? Looks like they were all there. Damn. And the amount of black vehicles, as if no one knows that's with the entourage. Unbelievable. Who paid for that? Well, that would be you and me. Actually, probably the people of Atlanta. You know, he sticks these jurisdictions with all this money to protect him, and he never pays. Never. That was a parade. Did he get a parade permit? He's a private citizen now. He's not someone special. Because someone's got to pay for the overtime for these cops to sit around and eat donuts and then write a report about riding in a motorcade. Jesus. Okay. I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of work to purge all of these Nazis out of law enforcement and the military and everywhere else they are. But you know what? We better get to work. I swear to God, we better get to work. If they can do it for the Marshall Plan, we can do it for us right here. Okay? Everybody talks about everything going overseas. Well, how about assigning the purging of Nazis in this country? That's what I want to see. That is truly what would make America great. Okay. Got the rant off my chest. Feeling a little frisky here on a Friday? Yeah. And why don't we give you a rundown on what we have curated for you here in this fine salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we begin in the Bistro Cafe part of such. Yes, Marjorie Taylor Greene was dragged mercilessly for posting a Photoshop MAGA mugshot after Trump was booked and released at a Georgia jail. Boy, you know, the moral rot of that side touches every single member. And that was why they were so easily brainwashed into believing all sorts of things, and I don't need to go into them. But one would be that Donald Trump should be the leader of the free world. Give me an effing break. Okay. On the rest of the menu, actual SEALs are not happy with DeSantis's claims of being a Navy SEAL. Jewish organizations in Arizona are being terrorized in swatting attacks. Wow. And the Kansas City, Missouri Fire Department is under a U.S. Department of Justice investigation for racial discrimination. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Belarusian authorities declared the country's oldest and most prominent human rights group, an extremist organization. And a top science publisher has withdrawn a peer-reviewed study cited by climate skeptics that presented misleading conclusions on climate change impacts. In other words, they lied. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who does much more than just monitor the chat room. So thank you, Kelly, for everything that you do. If you would look across the page from that chat room link to the left, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could possibly afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could send those funds to us once a month, thus becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay our bills and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for quite a few years, over a dozen, by the way. Yeah, 13 to be exact. Going on more. And it looks like we're going to have to, because the tectonic threat to our American way of life is really being threatened, and we don't like it. So thank you for allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter while we're still there, also on Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, wherever, you can do so at Netroots Radio, and Tom takes care of that and a hell of a lot more as well. So thank you, Tom, for everything that you do. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, etc., at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime, and that's where you find the show notes and links. So you can read the actual articles from the actual reporters who have done the reportage. That's the way we do it here, and we like it. If you would like to follow the show, you can do so at Cookbook West on Twitter, and we'll get on the other platforms and maybe even under West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy this time. Maybe. Anyway, you can also, most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., just not Stitcher. You know, you spend a dozen years with one of the first people that approached you and said, we'd like to carry your station live, and we'll blast it around the world. Here, sign here. And we did. And then SiriusXM came in and said, that's right, we're disaster capitalists, and goodbye. So, just not on Stitcher anymore. Where are they? Okay. Got a lot of grievances on a Friday. They build up, you know. Better to let them out than just let them fester. Okay, let us now delve into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And the first offering is out of the Daily Beast. Yeah, I broke down and got a month subscription, and now I'm probably going to get stuck, because it's going to roll over from their low introductory price to their, I don't know, it's not so much for a month, but it all adds up. Anyway, Justin Rohrlich of the Daily Beast brings us this first offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. On Wednesday night, Ron DeSantis had an important message for those watching him participate in the first Republican debate of the presidential primary season. I learned in the military, I was assigned with the U.S. Navy SEALs in Iraq, that you focus on the mission above all else. You can't get distracted, DeSantis said. So Republicans, we've got to look forward. We've got to make sure that we're bringing the message that can win in November 2024. Now, DeSantis moved on without further explanation, leaving some observers extremely impressed. Others, however, were far less moved. He was never a Navy SEAL. Bill Ullman, a former member of SEAL Team 1, told the Daily Beast, it is a misleading statement. DeSantis again said during the debate that he deployed to Iraq along U.S. Navy SEALs, mirroring the backstory shared earlier this month on a podcast hosted by former Trump counsel turned co-defendant Jenna Ellis. She needs the money, During the show, DeSantis' campaign surrogate Carly Atchison described her boss's path through life in deeply inspirational terms. DeSantis grew up blue-collar, then worked his way through Yale and Harvard Law, Atchison said, but rather than using his pair of Ivy League degrees to make six figures doing whatever, after 9/11, he raised his hand and said, I want to serve my country. Wow. He's making a lot more than six figures by getting paid by Leonard Leo and all the others. So, maybe he made a good business decision after all. So, Atchison continued, he went out to Coronado. He trained and was deployed ultimately with SEAL Team 1 in some of the most dangerous parts of the world at the time, Fallujah and others. Served his country out of this need for service. Really? Then he went on to run for Congress. He obviously became governor, and now he's running for president of the United States because he wants to reverse the decline of this country. Editor's note, the only decline in this country that could even be mentioned as a decline is the fact that all these Nazis are getting away with what they're getting away with. The United States is not in decline. We are ascendant. These people hate America. And the thing they hate more than America are Americans. They can't stand us. The next day, Atchison appeared on another show, again lauding DeSantis over his decision to forsake a life of riches for a hitch with the SEALs. He trained at Coronado with the SEALs, and he was ultimately deployed to Iraq with SEAL Team 1. Atchison told host Bill Mitchell, emphasizing that DeSantis spent time in some of the most dangerous parts of the world. That's just the kind of person he is, Atchison went on, before launching into a rundown of DeSantis' poll numbers and complimenting his bold conservative leadership. A day later, Atchison gave another interview, again describing the way DeSantis went out to train in Coronado and was deployed with Navy SEAL 1 to Iraq, and he earned a Bronze Star. In fact, DeSantis was a Navy lawyer, known in military parlance as a JAG, and in 2007, 3 years after his commission, he did serve as a legal advisor to a SEAL commander in Iraq. His role was to ensure the SEALs and Army Green Berets in the region abided by the rule of law and that captured enemy troops were treated humanely in line with the Geneva Conventions. He was responsible for the pyramid stacking, for the electrocution of prisoners with coned hoods on their heads, standing on some milk crates. He let that go on? No wonder those soldiers were sent to jail. And it wasn't him that was sending them to jail. He was the one that told them it was okay. I wish somebody would bring that up. Jared McDonald-Avoy of the Arizona Mirror brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Arizona is one of 12 states that have been the target of hoax calls to police or suicide hotlines, where a man on the line says he aims to kill himself and others with a bomb, prompting a police response in an online form of harassment known as swatting. The Arizona chapter of the Anti-Defamation League confirmed to the Arizona Mirror that 3 Jewish institutions in the Grand Canyon state were targeted starting in mid-July by a network of online perpetrators who have been targeting Jewish, Black, and Sikh places of worship across the country. The New York Times reported earlier this month that 26 such swatting calls have been made in 12 states. The Mirror is the first to report some of those calls that targeted Arizona congregations. The 26 calls tracked by the ADL all aim to commit the act of swatting against the institutions. Now, we know swatting is when a hoaxer deceives police to respond, often with heavily armed SWAT teams, by calling in a fake emergency or bomb threat. Oftentimes, swatting calls are used to harass individual people at their residences. In this case, they are targeting places of worship. Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Kansas City, Missouri Fire Department is under a U.S. Department of Justice investigation for alleged racial discrimination. The Kansas City spokesperson confirmed to the Kansas City Star yesterday, Thursday. Associated Press phone calls requesting comment from the federal agency were not immediately returned. 3 black firefighters told the newspaper that they were interviewed by the Department of Justice within the past year about racism and their treatment at the agency. A black firefighter sued last week, claiming he was retaliated against for talking to the Justice Department. The federal investigation comes after the Kansas City Star reported on unwritten rules within the department that kept black firefighters from preferred stations, hampered their ability to be promoted, and often left them ostracized in majority white stations. In one incident, a white fire cadet joked that his favorite knot was a noose and placed it around the neck of a black classmate at the fire academy 2 years ago. The city tried to fire him, but he resigned after intervention from the firefighters' union. The paper reported that only 14% of the fire department employees are black in a city where 30% of the residents are black. Its stations remain unofficially segregated by long-standing promotion practices. At some busy inner-city fire stations, there hasn't been a black captain in at least a decade. And female firefighters also reported severe sexual harassment. Well, it looks like there's some cleaning out that needs to be done there. Let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, a blast from TV's past. There's an air of nostalgia contained in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem that seems fitting. After all, these pizza-loving heroes in a half-shell have been around since the 80s. Gen Xers and elder millennials will get the sly nods and references to the comics, TV cartoon show, and past movies, but there's nothing dated about this reboot. Set in present-day New York City, the premise is the same as it's always been. 4 mutant turtles live in the sewers along with their adoptive father/mutant rat, Splinter. Splinter, voiced here by martial arts icon Jackie Chan, has raised his sons to be ninjas in order to protect them from the human world above them. Splinter knows from his own painful experience that humans don't do well with those that are different from them. He wants nothing more than to protect his boys and forget about humans, but the turtles are, as suggested in the moniker, teenagers and ignore his advice. Thanks to exposure to a steady stream of pop culture, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, and Donatello want very much to be part of the human world, and even dream about attending high school one day. A chance encounter with the high school journalist April O'Neil, voiced by the Bear stars Ioe Deborah, sets them off on an adventure where they not only learn about humans, but about their own origins. Combining beautiful animation, zaniness, and a memorable new character in the form of a villain called Superfly, Turtles Mutant Mayhem is arguably one of the best animated movies of the year so far. It's funny, but also surprisingly touching, and includes themes of tolerance and family. Indeed, this is one reboot that just might be better than the original. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
So the apothecaries founded this space as somewhere where they could train their students in how to identify medicinal plants from harmful plants, plants that can kill and cure, so to speak.
In London's neighbourhood of Chelsea, next to the River Thames and enclosed by a tall brick wall, is a collection of poisonous plants that can kill you. There are also plants that can treat you when you're sick, and even plants that many of our modern medicines are derived from. I'm Shayla Love, and you're listening to Scientific American Science Quickly. Today, we're paying a visit to the Chelsea Physic Garden, one of the oldest botanical gardens in Europe, with 4 acres dedicated to the ancient science of healing. When I first walk inside, it looks like a typical garden. There's a gravel path that crunches under my feet and twists and turns through crowded plant beds. But after glancing at the map, it becomes clear I'm in a different kind of garden. On my right is a poison bed, where the plant signs also include a skull and crossbones.
Maybe we can go to the poisonous plants, because I feel like that's probably a big draw.
Yeah.
You don't see that often in botanical gardens.
That's adjacent to the Garden of Useful Plants, which contains plants associated with scientific developments of the past and present.
Science journalist was like, ooh, the medical plants. It just was like a perfect overlap of my interest.
They are devoted to different parts of the body: the heart, nervous system, stomach.
This, here we've got hemlock.
That's Frances Sampaio.
I'm Deputy Director of Visitor Experience at Chelsea Physic Garden.
In the poison bed, Frances is showing me hemlock, a highly poisonous herbaceous flowering plant.
You can see this kind of like purple stem. And in the last 3 weeks, this has gone from having all white flowers in small clusters into, kind of the later part of its life cycle, and it's really dangerous to consume.
A hemlock drink, as some of you probably know, is what killed Socrates. Right next to the hemlock is an edible plant called sweet cicely. The two look uncomfortably alike.
Yeah, so the leaves are really similar.
In an earlier part of their life cycle, both cicely and hemlock have white flowers. The side-by-side placement of these two plants is intentional. It's a representation of the Physic Garden's original purpose, to teach young apothecary apprentices how to tell the difference between toxic and non-toxic plants.
The garden was founded in 1673 on what used to be a kind of market garden, part of Chelsea.
At this time, this area of London was like the suburbs. It wasn't central London at all. The garden was originally founded by the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries.
For them to learn their craft, they needed to be able to recognize plants, know where to collect them, how to collect them, make sure they're not getting the poisonous bits, not belladonna in the wrong amounts, that sort of thing.
That's Jonathan Holliday, master of the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries.
And obviously this is before photography, before kind of Google ident, so it was really important that people had that plant knowledge of what they were using.
Next, Frances shows me the poisonous plant henbane, paired with a cautionary tale of 4 children who accidentally ate henbane instead of hazelnuts, putting them to sleep for 2 days and nights. Then we see a plant called giant hogweed. There are signs warning that even touching it can cause the skin to blister when exposed to the sun. The Worshipful Society of Apothecaries was given a lease on the garden in 1722 from Sir Hans Sloane, who did his medical training in it. The apothecary's rent was just £5 per year, with the promise to provide the Royal Society with plants. And
the other requisite was that this land would only be used as a garden for medicinal purposes, for teaching.
Over time, the garden was taken over by the City Parochial Foundation. And then it became an independent charity in the 1980s when it opened to the public for the first time. Over the years, it's had some notable visitors, such as
Agatha Christie, who was a famous crime writer. She studied with the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries and took their exams.
Christie lived nearby in Chelsea and was a frequent visitor to the garden. In 1917, she passed what was called the assistance examination, or a test to be what we might call a pharmacy technician today. With these credentials, she could give out medicine during World War I and World War II.
But it gave her a huge amount of plant knowledge and how to correctly dose things.
And for Christie's novels, it provided an intimate knowledge of poisons.
And in her books, she writes about plant poisons more than any other author, really, at that time, writing crime stories.
The garden also hosts hundreds of plants that our modern medicines are derived from, and it demonstrates the lesson that while many plants can be a poison at a higher dose, they can be a treatment at a lower one.
So we've got poppies here. So opiums obviously use pain relief.
Next to the motherwort plant is this description from Nicholas Culpeper, a botanist and physician who translated knowledge about plants from Latin into English. It reads, "It makes women joyful mothers of children and settles their wombs, as they should be." And there's an infamous plant connected to witchcraft.
Belladonna.
During the Renaissance, women in Italy were rumored to have made a solution from the belladonna berry and put droplets of it into their eyes.
It was said to make their pupils dilate so that they would look more beautiful. So belladonna, beautiful woman.
In ophthalmology, a synthesized form of the same chemical can still be used to help dilate the pupils.
But today, plants are not really on the medical syllabus.
Up until the 1970s, chemistry students still came to the garden as part of their training, but then it stopped being a requirement. Although visitors still learn about plants here today, the focus has shifted to something more general, our relationship to plants and nature in the modern medical age.
And so we'll have a lot of people come to the garden and they might say, "Oh, I'm on this medicine. I never knew that it came from a plant." There are some really amazing natural remedies that come from plants, and we're really lucky that actually today, we can have an aspirin tablet. We don't have to chew on willow bark to get that salicin that's going to give us that pain relief that we need. So both have their benefits and their merits.
And nature can be its own form of medicine. I started working in my community garden in Brooklyn last year, and the couple of hours a week I spend with my hands in the dirt clears my mind. What we grow isn't medicine, but rather vegetables and fruits to feed our neighbors. Whenever I'm visiting a city, if I have the time, I'll keep an eye out for a garden. The bigger the city, the better the trip. Gardens provide an oasis away from that urban din. When you're deep in the center of one, the only noises you hear around you are the buzzing of bees and swishing of leaves. But ultimately, nature is healing not because it's separate from us, but because of our relation to it and how we've always used plants to modify, help, or harm our body in some way.
So like you can learn about plants and then also thinking about the importance of being in nature and how just as being a green space, we almost provide a medicinal space for people because it's all about well-being.
Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Del Vicio, Tulika Bose, Kelso Harper, and Corinne Leong. Our theme music was composed by Dominic Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. For more in-depth science news and features, go to scientificamerican.com. And if you like the show, give us a rating or review. For Science Quickly, I'm Shayla Love. See you next time.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The American colonists were not the first people on the North American continent. Native Americans had lived on the continent for at least 24,000 years. The eastern woodland tribes lived along the eastern seacoast, where the British colonists settled. These included the Iroquois League, which is made up of 5 tribes that lived in what today is the state of New York. These well-organized tribes maintained political ties among themselves so that they could discuss common problems. They lived by hunting and gathering, and by tending small crops such as beans, corn, and squash, which the Iroquois called the Three Sisters. When planted together, these 3 crops produced more than if planted alone. However, there were many negative effects from Native Americans' contact with colonists. Native Americans suffered from the encroachment of colonial settlements, disease, and warfare, leading to a drastic decline in the native population. In fact, by the end of the Revolutionary War, there were relatively few Native Americans living along the Atlantic coast. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Can you be banned from voting when you're 90 because of a crime you committed when you were 18? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. 15 states have a lifetime ban on voting as part of their punishment for various crimes. Note, 35 states don't. Now, consider Mississippi, where the state's constitution, adopted in 1890, specified for the lifetime voting ban crimes which, historians agree, were disproportionately prosecuted against black people. Unfortunately, lawsuits claiming that these lifetime bans violate equal protection have lost. But a challenge to Mississippi's lifetime ban recently won, based on an entirely different legal theory. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals 2-1 has ruled that the state's lifetime ban on voting violates the Eighth Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Because, for people who have completed their sentence, this continuous punishment, this lifetime deprivation of the most basic democratic right, serves no legitimate purpose of sentencing. It's irrational, constitutes vengeance, is punishment simply for the sake of punishment, and therefore is cruel. And because only 15 of the 50 states have such bans, down from 31 in 1974, it now also is unusual. The dissent said the legislature can have a voting ban if it wants one, and the state attorney general has vowed to appeal. So, the case is likely headed to the Supreme Court. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1819. That was the day that Alan Pinkerton was born in Glasgow, Scotland. His father was a policeman who died while Alan was a boy. This left the family in poverty. As a young man, he became involved in the Chartism movement. This reform movement hoped to expand the political rights of the working class in Great Britain. Alan had to flee his homeland to avoid arrest because of his involvement. This led him to Chicago. It is a great historic irony that Alan Pinkerton came to the United States because of his involvement in a working class cause. Today, Pinkertons are often considered some of the greatest armed foes against unionism in U.S. labor history. In Chicago, Pinkerton became involved in law enforcement and then formed his own detective agency. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency made its name working against railway thefts, but it became most notorious for opposing the labor movement. Pinkerton spies infiltrated labor meetings for company owners, worked as hired guns to stop union organizing, and protected strikebreakers. Alan Pinkerton died in 1884 and passed the agency on to his sons. During the 1890s, there were more Pinkertons and reserves than the standing army of the United States. One of the most famous battles between Pinkertons and workers occurred at the 1892 strike against Carnegie Steel in Homestead, Pennsylvania. There, 7 workers and 2 Pinkertons were killed. The event inspired a song by William W. Delaney. The lyrics included the lines, quote, "God help them tonight in their hour of affliction, praying for him who they'll ne'er see again. Hear the poor orphans tell their sad story. Father was killed by a Pinkerton man." For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low 90s, a tad cooler than what we had yesterday. Mostly cloudy throughout the day with visibility reduced by smoke. We continue to be in an air quality alert, and winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Mainly cloudy overnight, visibility reduced by smoke. Lows in the upper 50s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then mainly cloudy tomorrow with visibility reduced by smoke. And that's going to be our forecast through the whole weekend and into next week, at least. Highs tomorrow will be in the mid-90s with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated low here in our little town of Rogue River, but the air quality index for the region is in the unhealthy range because of smoke, and it is at 173 parts per million, and healthy is at 30 parts per million, just as a guide. The daytime UV index is rated high at level 7. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.97 inches. Visibility is down to 1.2 miles. And relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is why it's called the Weather Underground. London is 70 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 70 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 95 and sunny with a heat advisory. Kabul is 71 degrees and clear. Kyiv is 80 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 82 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 83 degrees and partly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 54 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 62 and cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay because of gusts up to 50 miles per hour. Chicago is 72 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 74 degrees Fahrenheit with showers in the vicinity. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Yoris Carminow of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Belarusian authorities declared the country's oldest and most prominent human rights group an extremist organization. The move against Vyazna, founded by imprisoned Nobel Peace Prize laureate Alice Bialatsky, comes amid a years-long crackdown on dissent in Belarus and exposes anyone involved in its activities to criminal prosecution. Belarus was swept by massive protests, some of which drew more than 100,000 people after the August 2020 presidential vote handed a sixth term to the country's authoritarian president Alexander Lukashenko. The election was fraudulent, or the election was rejected as fraudulent by the opposition and the West. Authorities responded with a brutal crackdown. More than 35,000 people were arrested, thousands were beaten by police while in custody, and hundreds of non-governmental organizations and independent media outlets were shut down and outlawed as extremist. Sounds familiar about what could happen to the United States? The move against Vyazna significantly ramped up the pressure on dissenters in Belarus. It has branches in the majority of the country's large cities and hundreds of volunteers and activists all over the country who monitor human rights abuses in Belarus on a daily basis. The authorities say that anyone who has anything to do with the group and continues to be involved with it will face criminal charges such as contributing to an extremist organization. That offense is punishable by up to 7 years of hard labor.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff at the Agence France Presse brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Top science publisher Springer Nature said it has withdrawn a study that presented misleading conclusions on climate change impacts after an investigation prompted by an Agence France Presse inquiry. The AFP reported in September of 2022 on concerns over the peer-reviewed study by 4 Italian scientists that appeared earlier that year in the European Physical Journal Plus, published by Springer Nature. The study had drawn positive attention from climate skeptic media. The paper, titled A Critical Assessment of Extreme Events Trends in Times of Global Warming, purported to review data on possible changes in the frequency or intensity of rainfall, cyclones, tornadoes, droughts, and other extreme weather events. Several climate scientists contacted by AFP said the study manipulated data, cherry-picked facts, and ignored others that would contradict their assertions, prompting the publisher to launch an internal review. The journal's editors published an online note stating that the paper was retracted due to concerns over the selection of data, the analysis, and the resulting conclusions. It said the paper had been freshly reviewed by experts and the authors invited to submit an addendum in response to the criticisms. But a review found this is not suitable for publication and that conclusions of the article were not supported by available evidence or data provided by the authors. Recent studies have indicated that climate misinformation has flourished online as governments push reforms to curb the use of fossil fuels that cause planet-warming carbon emissions. A further investigation published by Agence France-Presse in April of 2023 showed that skeptics opposed to the scientific consensus on human-caused climate change had got other misleading studies published in peer-reviewed journals. Experts pointed to widespread concerns about peer review standards in the lucrative academic publishing industry. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pas fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.